and welcome to Manx Radio, where you're listening to our General Election Candidate Interview Series. I'm our election producer, Amy Griffiths, and in just a few short weeks, you'll get to choose who you think should represent you in the House of Keys for the next 5 years. Ahead of the next general election, on the Thursday, the 24th of September, we've invited all the candidates to take part in a 30-minute interview to tell us more about themselves. Up next is Dave Mackey, who's standing in Douglas East. He's been speaking to Phil Gawne.
Falcheru gus Rias Kaj and Shears Feed. Today I'm talking to Dave Mackey, who's standing for the first time in the constituency of Douglas East. And we'll begin with a nice gentle lob question. Why do you want to be an MHK and what's your motivation for standing?
Yeah, why would anybody want to do it, Phil? I've always been politically interested, both from my work background and with natural things happening on the island. And I'm also a qualified tour guide. And what you appreciate as a tour guide is that over the last 150, 170 years, the Isle of Man has been very dynamic at rediversifying itself. A lot of our towns and small villages were built up on the industry that was prevalent at the time, which died out. So we've always been very good at rediversifying ourselves. But I think now we're at a critical stage in our existence. The Isle of Man needs the next big thing. We've had 30, 40 years of growth with financial services and e-gaming and insurance. And for various reasons, those industries are dying out and we're constantly eating into reserves. So I didn't want to sit back and let this happen to an island that I love. I want to try and make a difference, turn things around on the island and get the island sailing in the right direction. I couldn't sit back and let it happen and then feel that I could have a say when I wasn't willing to stick my head above the parapet in the first place.
I mean, you say there that we're eating into reserves. Actually, we're not growing the reserves as strongly as perhaps we might because we're using the income that we make on reserves. It's not quite the same, is it?
But, it's very easy to be complacent, Phil. I mean, the government says we've got £2 billion of reserves, but a billion of that is for public sector pensions. So it's not going to take a lot. I mean, look what happened with COVID. That came out of left field and all of a sudden there was 150 million gone there. We have to start diversifying and growing the economy urgently. I believe it's the number one priority. Yes, there's other concerns that we have on the island, but the number one priority, I believe, for any standing candidate is growing the economy, particularly in Douglas East. It's the reason why I'm standing in Douglas East is because I've either lived or worked there. We came over as a family when I was a 12, 13-year-old lad. My parents ran the Ascot Hotel it's still in the family name now. Actually, I ran it myself for 30 years. I've always rightly or wrongly looked at Douglas East as my patch. I've always had my ear to the ground. I've still got a lot of contacts and a lot of business people who support me standing for this. And, Douglas East, I believe, is the gateway to the rest of the island, and I believe it's a very, very important constituency.
I'm going to pick you up on something which you said just at the start of that answer. £1 million for public sector pensions. Is that what you mean?
A billion, yeah.
A billion?
Yeah, that's kind of ring-fenced, isn't it?
That's the National Insurance Fund.
National Insurance Fund, sorry, yeah.
And it's not so much, well, I mean, it depends what you mean by public sector pensions. Public sector pensions, as I understand it, is the pensions of civil servants that retire. But actually what the 1.2 billion is for, the National Insurance Fund, is to pay state pensions primarily,
which is going to run out by 2045, Phil.
Yeah.
So going on to what you said, it sounds like a very comfortable financial situation, but when you actually break it down, unless we get the motor running now, we're going to be behind the 8 ball before we realise it.
And I don't think there's any doubt that pretty much everyone standing in this election is going to be concerned about the gap between the expenditure and the income. So far, and you did say before we started this interview that the manifesto is on its way, but so far you've not actually come up with an awful lot by way of answers here. I mean, and it is a big issue to try and resolve. I mean, obviously looking for the next big thing is a great aspiration, but how are you going to go about doing that? I mean, how are you going to deliver the next big thing?
I think we need to focus on it, Phil. I think a lot of energy is being, I wouldn't say wasted, but diverted into other areas. I think this has to be a priority. The DfE needs to wake up. There needs to be maybe a new mandate for the DfE, whether that means reorganising it or shifting it elsewhere. I wouldn't know until I was diving into government myself. There are a lot of good people on the island who I know personally, entrepreneurs, self-made people who have got fantastic ideas about all sorts of other industries. There are good people within the Chamber of Commerce who equally share my concerns about the perilous state of the island's finances. There's a lot that can be done, Phil. There's a lot of people who care on this island who can make a difference very, very quickly. It just needs, I believe, the will of government to facilitate that.
So maybe a good way of answering this question then would be to give some examples of innovation that you've done yourself in your personal life.
In business life?
Yeah.
To keep any small business going, Phil, you have to be innovative. I mean, from my own personal experience in hoteliering, you have to do 200 things really well. You've got to be good at marketing. You've got to be good at psychologically motivating the staff. You've got to kind of see where trends are coming. You've got to go for non-busy periods and put events on. And running government is one big business. That's what government is, and it needs, I believe, Tynwald needs a cross-section of people for it to succeed. You need people who are parliamentarians. You need people who can scrutinise policy, and you also need business people who have got a bit of gumption and a bit of drive and a bit of determination and who are doers and collaborative between Tynwald. You can get things done. You need a cross section of people for it to work.
Well, we ask each of the candidates what your top priorities would be, and you have chosen the economy, which I think we've been talking about, Moor Vannon wind farm, and solving connectivity issues. In relation to Moor Vannon, in your leaflet, you do refer to it, and you talk about ensuring that there is complete transparency on environment and economic impact before major decisions are set in stone. It doesn't tell us an awful lot about what, when push comes to shove, are you in favour or are you against the Moor Vannon wind farm?
The bottom line is, in the next 20 years, we all are going to need 30, 40, 50% more power. So where does that come from? Does it come? We have lots of resources naturally in the island that we can use, whether it's tidal, wind, the sun. With the Moor Vannon scheme itself, I almost think it's an admission of guilt from the government that they're completely and utterly lost. They don't know how to raise revenue. I think in its current guise, if I'm allowed to say this, I'm against it. I'm not against green energy, and I'm not against wind turbines per se. But in its current guise, the way it's set out at the moment, it's not in the interest of the Isle of Man people, and that's what any major scheme. This is the largest planning application, Phil, that we are likely to see, certainly mine in your lifetime. We have to get this right for the Manx people. We can't sell ourselves down the river. We can't have been short-changed negotiation-wise for seabed rental. We have to be sure environmentally that it's correct. There's been so much. I don't think the public are trustworthy of the reports that have been produced so far. Nothing has been etched in stone. What we needed, I believe, was a public meeting with Forster fronting it, somebody from the government at one side, somebody from the environmental side on the other, and we can hammer it out, and it's all out in the open, then we all know what we're talking about. All we're getting is one-sided societies who have maybe vested interests. Orsted want this to go ahead, obviously. The people of Garth and Onchan don't want it to go ahead because it's going to affect their views intrinsically. There's so many vested interests in this, Phil. It really is. We have to get this right. We've got to get this right. It's a massive issue for the Isle of Man. Surprisingly, in my constituency, it hasn't been as much of a concern, possibly because of the NIMBY effect. It doesn't affect people in Douglas East. But from an island-wide perspective, it's huge, and we've got to get it right.
It is going to be very visible from Douglas East as well, though, isn't it? Very
much so. But there is a wind farm that you can see on a clear day. I'm not quite sure. It's obviously not in our seas, but there is a wind farm that's visible on most clear days. It's the environmental issue again, which I think Orsted produced one, didn't they, not too long ago, and a lot of people on social media were castigating that. But so there's no truth. We need clarity, full disclosure. But the bottom line is, Phil, this is going to affect the Isle of Man for the next 30 or 35 years. We've got to get this right for ourselves and be selfish and look after ourselves, because we're all standing for the Isle of Man and its people, and we've got to get it right.
You began when I asked the initial question by saying that we need 30 to 50% more energy in the future. I mean, where are you getting those figures from? And
I've done quite a bit of research on it, and the way we use energy, and the way the world's going with AI and this sort of stuff. More energy is going to be needed in the future. But I think we're in a very fortunate position. We really are. We've got a lot of resources at hand here. But obviously it comes down to the common factor again, Phil. It comes about, the bottom line is what Treasury funds are available. This is what it's all about. So we've got to diversify the economy so we can look forward to a solid future energy-wise in the next 15 to 20 years.
You talk about connectivity, and basically your view is that it's never been more problematic getting on and off the island for various reasons. If we're going to thrive, issues at the air and seaport have to be resolved through strategic decision-making and sensible spending. What do you think the politicians down at the DOI think they're doing then? If not strategic decision-making and sensible spending.
Now you're really taking me down a rabbit hole here, Phil, with the DOI, aren't you? The bottom line is the airport is a small regional airport. It should run like clockwork, and it doesn't. It's as simple as that. Whether it's air traffic controllers, which we still haven't resolved, whether it's the requisite landing lighting, which we don't have. Is that what's stopping planes from landing in minimal fog? It just goes on and on. When you asked me before, why am I standing? There was sort of 2 or 3 pivotal moments in the winter where it was literally a head in hands job, and the one that was the pushing, the tipping point for me was when the EasyJet plane landed. Was on the tarmac at Ronaldsway for an hour and a half, and for various reasons, both with our infrastructure and our wind direction, those poor people were sat there for an hour and a half, and it took off and went back to Liverpool. I mean, you just think, if you're a CEO of a company who wants to relocate here to the Isle of Man, you're going to think, why is that happening? Why should I come here? And the knock-on effect of that with people's jobs and work and childcare and whose interest was that plane not got off? Every opportunity should have been given to get those poor people off, and it wasn't, and it was a disgrace.
DOI told us that it was down to a safety issue in relation to the equipment that they have for getting people on and off the plane, and I guess it would have probably been far worse had the steps been blown over while people were getting off the plane.
When you run a business, or if you're in charge of infrastructure, you find ways of getting the end result. That's what running any large infrastructure is about. Is get the people off. I mean, I believe the pilot offered to turn the aircraft 90 degrees. That wasn't acceptable. He offered to move it into a hangar. That wasn't acceptable. Just some little jobs worth with a clipboard saying, "I'm sorry, no." In whose interest was that? The minister should have been down on whoever that person was responsible for the next day like a ton of bricks, and ensuring this doesn't happen again. But again, if did it come down, I believe the steps were only relevant for a certain wind speed worthy. We need the infrastructure if that's the case. We need to liaise with EasyJet. There's Phil. It's a small airport. I mean, how many flights do we have coming and going each day? And I know from experience, I've had friends who have left the island in the last 12 to 18 months solely because of issues of connectivity. They need to get away for weekends, for work and pleasure and this kind of thing. And we all do. A lot of people have a lot of interests and do day trips and particularly in the winter months. We're not talking so much about the summer, although we're not going down the steam packet road at the moment.
Perhaps you should, because that's part of connectivity.
Well, it is, and it's a big bugbear of mine, Phil, as well. I mean, I go back to 2018 when it was nationalised. I mean, why did we buy it in the first place? If you buy it, then you're fully in. You're running it, and there's a mandate that comes from Tynwald. But why we decided to buy it, one, we overbought for it anyway. We should have just let our own agreement run out. And then having bought it, just to hand it back as it was to the steam packet with no accountability. You can't get an FOI from the steam packet. We had the situation where Brian Thompson, rightly or wrongly, I'm not criticising Mr Thompson per se, rightly or wrongly didn't tell the Manx public for 3 weeks what was going on with the Manxmen at a busy time. Our businesses and our tourism sector and our people need our boats to be working at the busiest times of the year, and we've all been let down. Every single one of us have been let down, and it was hidden in a mode of secrecy where nobody knew what was going on until basically the Manx Radio forced an answer from them, and that's not the way it should be. There should be more accountability. I think we need to look at how the steam packet is run, and I firmly believe it should be a statutory board with a management structure put in charge, who are in charge of running it administratively, but ultimately how it's run, how it's governed, and more importantly, the pricing structure comes back to Tynwald.
Is government good at running things like commercial businesses?
No. But if the right people are in Tynwald and you vote for people who are business minded, then yes, there will be.
Okay. A number of the things that you've mentioned, I mean, particularly in relation to the airport, and indeed with the steam packet, if you're going to have more competitive pricing in place, then clearly the steam packet isn't going to make as much money. And one of the reasons, well, I think probably the only obvious reason that steam packet was bought was to make money for the shareholder, which is Isle of Man government. So it was a kind of a bit of a cash cow. I mean, we started the interview by describing the black hole the between government income and government expenditure. And what you've kind of listed so far are things that are going to require either less income or more money.
No, Phil, you've got to see the big picture here. If we're in control of our waters, we've got to do something dynamic with it. We really do. And if it means yielding fares, it's going to lead to more business, it'll more growth. We've got to give people a reason to come here. I know as a tour guide that we are masters at underselling ourselves, masters. I did a 9-hour tour on Friday for 4 people on the cruise ship, and they were bowled over by the Isle of Man. They knew nothing about the Isle of Man. And believe you me, by the time they got back on that vessel, they knew amazing facts and amazing things that were started here. We're masters at underselling ourselves. The overnight ferry, we could get people here for minimal money. Let's just cover our fuel costs and cover our admin costs. Let's get people here. Let's grow something. It might only be small in the initial stage. Then you'll get private enterprise interested. Then other things will ball up on the start of it. Tourism is something we can control within ourselves, Phil. We can control it. We own the waters, right? We've got a blank sheet of paper that we can start all over again here now. You know, when my parents bought the hotel in 1979, it was the millennium, obviously, and it was probably the last big year that we had of mass tourism because that was well marketed. I'm not saying those days, you know, and if you go to the Eye Museum, the people were like penguins on the beach, weren't they? I'm not saying those days would ever come back here because you know, travel habits have changed dramatically over the last 40, 50 years, but we could still have a thriving tourism economy. I don't quite know what Deborah Heather was saying the other day when she says we don't want mass tourism. Well, one is I don't know what mass tourism is, and two is, well, I suggest you go around and knock on some of the doors of the tourism operators and hoteliers and publicans and restaurateurs and ask them if they want mass tourism. I would say they would definitely want mass tourism. So this is in our hands, Phil. You're asking me what the next big thing is. There are cleverer and better people than me who could maybe answer that for you. I'm happy to facilitate and go out and get business for the Isle of Man. But tourism is something that's within our realm that we can change, just with a few tweaks here and there.
Okay, another thing in your leaflet that you mention is accessible healthcare, and you're pushing for faster access to primary care, reduced waiting lists, and a health care system that truly protects our community. Does that mean even more money being spent?
I think I believe the Manx Care model is the right one. I don't believe there's any reason in it coming back to government because the Jonathan Michaels report, I believe, was all encompassing that. So there was no point going down, having reports by the Jonathan Michaels report and then going back on ourselves. There's no point in that. The Manx Care model is not working at the top level, I believe. I think maybe we need to look at it intrinsically. You know, you hear anecdotal stories of dual management and less care at the front end. I just think the Manx Care model would probably work with a little bit more tweaking. I mean, there's been great success in the last 6 months. We've reduced dentistry waiting lists. There are more GPs being trained up on the island, which will reduce waiting lists. We need to encourage people to use technology more, I believe, because if you use the patient access app, you can see gaps in the system more rather than ringing up a stressed and tired receptionist. I believe as well we need to. There are issues of digitisation. There's some departments not talking to others, not talking to GPs, which creates delays. And from my own experience as well, the Manx Care and the NHS is something I care passionately about because it saved my life last year. I won't go into details, but when the NHS and Manx Care, when I needed it, they were there for me big time, let me tell you. So it's something, it annoys me a little bit when people have a go at the NHS and they have a go at Manx Care. I know from first-hand experience that it was a lifesaver for me. So, yeah, everything's not rosy with Manx Care. Obviously, there's an extra 50 million was allocated to it in the budget, but it's a priority. It's a priority for this island, and it works tremendously well with all the Liverpool hospitals, which are unbelievable. Let me tell you.
One thing you don't mention yet, anyway, is housing. Why is that?
Housing is a priority, Phil. You know, we need to retain our young people here. Obviously, 18-year-olds are going away to university and we're losing them. They might come back in their early 30s once they're settled down and they've got children and, you know, the attraction of the island is still there. We need to build more houses. It's as simple as that. We need to liaise better with developers. We need to maybe introduce a buy-to-let scheme with government whereby people maybe overpay on the rent and that money is put into a fund for them to afford a deposit for a house. Also as well, I think we need to reflect modern day living. I mean, I think 30% of people these days who are taxpayers live by themselves. So we need to build more 1 and 2 bedroom properties to keep the system more fluid and to keep the whole thing going. But housing is a massive issue, Phil. It really is.
And I suppose that was the question. It is, I mean, most candidates.
But it was 5 years ago, and nothing's changed, has it? You know,
but I mean, you haven't specifically referred to it as yet, and I'm guessing there will be something.
There will be something on the manifesto. I was just that introductory leaflet that you're looking at was just me getting my 3 or 4 points out, but everything sort of progresses from there. You know, we all want to see a better society where there's more affordable housing, and every year it's getting more and more into the distances. I think it's now 9 times median earnings is the price of a house now, whereas when I bought my first house in the late 90s, I think it was about 4 or 5 times that. So we have great empathy, great sympathy for our young people, but we need to help them with various schemes. Either governmental or at a corporation level.
Are there any MHKs, either past or present, that inspire you?
Yeah, I think there's been some great, going back 40 years. I was a junior reporter at the Examiner and the defunct Manx Star when Alistair Ramsey was the Tynwald reporter. And there was great debate in those days. There were Donald Gelling and Clifford Irving, I remember, being quite combustible. Sir Charles Carouche, obviously. Edgar Mann, very studious, intelligent man. Tynwald was different in those days. You know, they were, I wouldn't use the term maverick, but they would take a risk. I mean, those guys basically created the finance sector out of nothing. You know, the Isle of Man had nothing going for it in the late 70s. And there was a lot more debate, a lot more maybe camaraderie, and a lot more, maybe more people representation in those days. Tynwald makes me sad at the moment because there seems to be almost a discord between what the public think and expect and what the politicians are producing. Whether they've all been browbeaten into the system, I don't know. So if I'm elected, I wouldn't say I'm as a man of the people. I think that's a bit of a cliche, really. But you know, I do know what the people want because I'm one of them, and I would hopefully be a good constituency politician who had his ear on the ground and knew what the sound bites and what the zeitgeist of the people is.
Well, believe it or not, we're almost at the end of the interview. We've just got a couple of minutes left for you to tell us, in a nutshell, why people should vote for you.
Well, I think people should vote initially. This is the most, in my lifetime, the most important election I can recall, which is why I'm standing, something I feel passionately about. I'm standing in Douglas East because I think it's the most important constituency. I want to make a difference, and we need to turn things around very, very quickly on this island. Otherwise, we're going to be suffering in the next 10 to 15 years if we don't. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater here. The Isle of Man is still a beautiful place. We're all still very fortunate to live here. Still a very safe, clean environment. With beautiful scenery and lovely people. And I've been so humbled speaking to so many lovely constituents in the last 2 or 3 weeks, Phil. It's been marvellous. Things aren't all bad. Social media sort of perpetrates this negativity and people get frustrated with it. It's not all bad. The ship is listing slightly this way. We just need to turn it back this way with a few positive ideas and a bit of creativity. This situation can certainly come round quickly.
If you are successful, what would you hope to be judged on? What would be the top thing that you would hope in 5 years' time people will look back and say, yeah, that young Mackey fella, he did a pretty good job.
Well, thank you for the young, Phil. Nobody is bigger criticism and an internal critic of themselves than me. So if I can look at myself in 5 years and say I achieved this, the economy is on a sounder footing, healthcare is improving, there's less time wait for doctors, and if my constituents are happy, then I'll be happy. But Phil, I look at myself every day and I'm my own worst judge.
That was Dave Mackey, who's standing for election in Douglas East. Also standing in the constituency are Clare Barber, Joney Faragher and Andy Saunders. You can listen back to this interview along with all the others recorded as part of this series shortly after broadcast from your usual podcast provider. And if you want to find out more about the upcoming election, just head to our dedicated election website, which you can find as always at manxradio.com.